This, of course, is a psalm of David. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord, and do good, so shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Commit thy way unto the Lord, trust also in him, and he shall bring it to pass. And he shall bring forth thy righteousness as the light, and thy judgment as the noonday. Rest in the Lord, and wait patiently for him. Fret not thyself because of him who prospereth in his way, because of the man who bringeth wicked devices to pass. Cease from anger, and forsake wrath. Fret not thyself in any wise to do evil. For evildoers shall be cut off, but those that wait upon the Lord, they shall inherit the earth. Yet for a little while, and the wicked shall not be. Yea, thou shalt diligently consider his place, and it shall not be. But the meek shall inherit the earth, and shall delight themselves in the abundance of peace. Psalms 37. What to do when the bad guys win. What do you do when the bad guys win? You know, I'm not talking about, let's say you're a Panthers fan and you're upset at Manny for winning the Super Bowl. I mean, you know, this message could apply to you in that situation, but I'm talking about how we respond when we do what's right, yet we get penalized. Seems like when the wicked people, they seem to always prosper. You know that really bugs us. For example, you'll hear your neighbor starts bragging about how he cheats on his taxes every year and how he gets back thousands of dollars in taxes, and you look in his home and it's loaded with just the finest furniture and appliances, you know, and then you just like you see his two luxury cars sitting in the driveway, and he's got all these four-wheelers and boats and just you name it, man. He's got everything, you know, and all the latest toys. And then you have to hear about him. Oh, I vacationed in Hawaii last year, and this, that, and the other. And here you are, you're trying to live for the Lord, and you try to be honest, and you pay your taxes. You don't lie about them. You give faithfully to the church, and then you look at your furniture, and Goodwill wouldn't even take it. You know, you got so many rips and stuff in them. And then you see your clunker of a car out there on its second 100,000 miles, and tires that's so bald you can't even drive down a dry road, much less a wet road. You know what I'm talking about. Then the closest thing to a vacation that you could afford is maybe going to the Walmart for a couple hours. You know what I'm saying? And then also, let's say you're single woman or single man, whatever, and you're trying to follow the Lord. So you decide, well, I'm not going to be unequally yoked, so I'm just going to date Christian guys or girls. And then you think back, well, when was my last date? You know, it could have been back in 1989, you know, because the girl next door or the boy next door, they don't have any standards, you know, and you see them, they have good-looking women and handsome hunks lining up, you know, to date them. It's just so irritating. You know what I'm talking about. It seems like the more you try to do what you feel is right, the more you get penalized for it. We've all been there. And you know, sometimes it seems like it doesn't pay at all to be good. When the evil prosper and all the good suffer, you can be tempted to doubt God in these situations, especially if you're trying to be the good guy or good lady in the situation. If you're not careful to cultivate the right perspective, you can be tempted to just say forget it and just join the evildoers. Just start doing what they're doing, you know. One of my favorite persons in the Bible is David. David's been there. He's been in this situation, you know. Although he had been anointed as king as a little teenager, he spent the better part of his 20s running from the ungodly King Saul. On several occasions, David did the right thing by sparing Saul's life, only to watch Saul return to his nice, comfortable palace, you know. And here David was having to sleep in a cave. I mean, with his head on a rock, you know. During that time, David also and his men also did right by a man named Nabal. They protected his shepherds and flocks from the bandits. But when David asked just a small little favor, you know, of Nabal, he pretty much said, "Drop dead." You know, David had many occasions to reflect on the problem of personal injustice. You know, we've all been there. So as an old man, David wrote Psalms 37 to share his insights on this problem. This Psalms reflects on the wisdom he had gleaned from the years of walking with God. There's far more here than we can cover in just this one short message, so I'm just going to cover the first 11 verses today, and I'll go over the other parts in a later message. But when the bad guys win, first you got to submit to God. You got to be content in Him and do rightly, trusting that the Lord is going to judge righteously. When the bad guys win, first you got to submit to God. And this pertains to verses 1 through 11 of Psalms 37. Although the word submit, you can't really find the word submit in these verses, but it is the idea behind everything in this verse, or in these verses. Submitting to God means putting off your irritations and your envies and your anger. 3 times we are commanded not to fret. You can see that in Psalms 37, 1, 7, and 8. The Hebrew word here means to burn. The verb is in the Hebrew, which means to be, you can translate that, don't work yourself into a slow burn. When you see evil men prospering, don't let it get under your skin. This is only going to lead you to doing wrong. You can read that in Psalms 37, 8. One reason we get irritated when we see evil men getting away with their schemes is that we're assuming that we know how to run the world better than God does. So one aspect of submission to God is to put off that type of irritation. Give God the sovereign right to deal with these evildoers in His time and in His way. So many times we try to do it, our own way and in our own time. And as you probably well know, that doesn't work. We're also commanded not to envy the wrongdoers in Psalms 37:1. This confronts the selfishness and evil motives that's in our hearts. Often the reasons we don't want evildoers to prosper is not that we hate the sin they commit, but secretly we're wishing that we could just do what they're doing. You know what I'm saying? We want ourselves to pleasure in this same sin that they're enjoying in. Of course, we want the tax money back. We want all the toys, and when you're single, you want the women and the men. You know what I'm saying? But we've got to submit to God and judge our envy. We're also commanded not to anger in Psalms 37:8. The first word anger comes from a Hebrew word meaning nostrils. When somebody gets really mad, their nostrils will flare out. The second word wrath comes from another Hebrew word meaning hot and points to rage. The Bible teaches that most anger is sinful and that we can control it. Otherwise, it wouldn't command us to stop doing it, right? Anger shows that we're not in submission to the sovereignty of God. We're saying, in effect, God, I don't like the way you're running things. That's not fair to me. I don't deserve this kind of treatment from these wicked people. The bottom line is we're not submitting ourselves to God. A rule of thumb for discerning righteous anger from sinful anger is this. If I'm angry about injustice that's being done toward others, that might be righteous anger. This anger should motivate me to take appropriate action on behalf of these victims. But if I'm angry about injustice that I think is being done toward me, then more than likely it's probably sinful anger. Most anger is selfish and therefore sinful. Submitting to God when I see the bad guys winning means just put off your irritation, your envy, and your anger. Submitting to God means putting on trust, obedience, patience, and humility as we delight in the Lord. When we see the bad guys winning, we need to just shift our focus from the evildoers and put that focus on the Lord. 5 times in Psalms 37, 3 through 9, you can read about it, David mentions the Lord by name, and 5 more times he uses the third person pronoun to refer to the Lord. He's saying that the antidote for getting frustrated with the prosperity of the wicked is to be deliberately God-centered. This involves putting on several qualities. Put on trust. Trust in the Lord is not a hollow slogan. It's, of course, an action. It means that when evildoers, it seems like they're winning and you're losing all the time, you just take that whole problem and roll that over to the Lord and watch Him vindicate you in His time. Put on obedience. Do good, dwell in the land, and cultivate faithfulness. Leave things in God's hands. Trust and go on with your normal duties obediently before the Lord. Don't let the other person's sin lead you into doing that sin. Don't let that draw you in. Don't envy that. Do what God has given you to do in obedience to Him. Put on patience. Rest in the Lord and wait patiently for Him. That's the hard part of submission. He may not act on your timetable. It may take months, years, or it could even take a whole lifetime. There's still things I'm waiting on, and I pray for, but I've got to let God do it on His time. Sooner or later, God is going to act, and He will vindicate us. But if you trust Him to be just and righteous God, submit to Him, then you will wait patiently. Put on humility. To be humble or meek means to realize our own weakness and sinfulness so that we rely on the Lord and quit relying on ourselves and our own way of thinking. The awareness of sinfulness means that we won't self-righteously judge the wicked. Apart from God's mercy, we would act just as they do. Humility means being aware of our own inadequacies apart from the Lord, but at the same time, our adequacy in the Lord. Meekness does not mean weakness, but it means brokenness. A humble or meek person is like a strong but broken horse, powerful but yet submissive to its master's touch. Jesus took Psalms 37:11 as his third beatitude. Blessed are the gentle, which means the humble or meek, for they shall inherit the earth. The world says just the opposite. The world's pretty much saying, blessed are those who assert themselves and stand up for their own rights. But David and Jesus disagrees. It's the meek who will ultimately come out on top. The abundant prosperity of 37:11 is literally abundance of peace and refers to soul prosperity, not material riches. The person who finds his adequacy in the Lord rather than in himself and the things and of all his things has an abundant source of peace. Be delighted in the Lord. Trust, obedience, patience, and humility can all be summed up in the phrase, delight yourself in the Lord. Be captivated with the Lord and all that He is, rather than focusing on things that the world seeks. Focus on the Lord and gaining the Lord. You gain everything else you ever need. Come on, it says He will give you the desires of your heart. This don't mean that He'll give you anything your little selfish heart desires, If you're delighting yourself in the Lord, then your desires will be in line with His desires. This is like the Matthew 6:33 of the Old Testament. Seek first God's kingdom and righteousness, and all these things, all your needs, will be added unto you. That's plain and simple. You may apply these principles to your marriage or to any relationship. And I'm speaking to myself here. Let's say a husband wrongs his wife. He's just being really insensitive. He's given verbal abuse. He's committed adultery, or you just named the sin. She's going to be tempted to get very irritated, of course, and be envious. He does as he pleases. Why can't I? Or vice versa, And then they're going to get angry. If he or she responds selfishly by getting even or standing up for his or her rights, that's only going to cause more damage to the relationship. But if they respond to the wrong done to them by putting off their irritation, envy, and anger, and putting on the trust in the Lord, obedience, and waiting patiently upon Him, and have humility, the awareness of their own inadequacies, but also of Christ's sufficiency. Not in the spirit of self-pity, but delighting in yourself in the Lord. Sooner or later, your husband or wife, or your girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, is going to look at you and say, wow, they've got something that I need in my life. And it could bring them to repentance, and your marriage might be saved, or your relationship could be saved. But whatever the outcome, they're going to enjoy the abundance of peace that's going to come from the Lord from doing these things. So the first principle is, when the bad guy wins, submit to the Lord. Now I will go over part 2 next time when the bad guy wins, to how to be content in the Lord. And that's going to cover Psalms 37:12-26. I hope you listen in. This is Jerome Griffin saying have a good night. God bless you, and may his peace abound in your life.